The salt spray stung Diana's face as she stood at the edge of the harbor, her wedding ring clutched in her trembling palm, knowing she would never see her homeland again. The port city of Harwich sprawled behind her in the early evening light, its cobblestone streets slick with rain, its old buildings pressing close together like gossiping neighbors. Diana Jenkins had arrived 3 hours ago with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small leather bag containing her mother's diary and the engagement ring that had belonged to her grandmother. The wedding ring, simple gold with a tiny diamond, was all she had left of value. Her fiancé had given it to her 2 years ago, before everything fell apart, before she discovered what he truly was. "You need passage?" The ship captain's voice was rough, weathered by decades at sea. He looked her up and down with calculating eyes that lingered too long on her bare ring finger. "Across to the continent?" "Yes." Diana's voice came out steadier than she felt. "To Calais. Tonight." "Tonight?" He laughed, tobacco-stained teeth showing. "Girl, do you know what waters we'd be crossing after dark? Those aren't normal shipping lanes once the sun goes down." Diana did know. Everyone knew. The modern world had adapted to the reality that had been revealed 5 years ago when the vampire courts had announced themselves to humanity. Treaties had been signed, boundaries established. The night belonged to them in certain territories, and the waters between England and France were considered neutral ground, which meant they were the most dangerous of all. "I don't have a choice," Diana said quietly. "I have to leave tonight." The captain studied her face, and something in her desperation must have moved him because his expression softened slightly. "The fare is £200, cash, no credit, no promises." Diana's heart sank. She had maybe £40 in her bag. She slowly opened her palm, revealing the wedding ring. "This is worth at least 300. It's real gold, certified diamond." He leaned forward, squinting at the ring in the fading light. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached out and plucked it from her hand with surprising gentleness. "This'll do," he said gruffly. "But I'm not responsible for what happens if we encounter any of them, you understand? You stay below deck, you keep quiet, and if they board us, you're on your own." "I understand." Diana followed him onto the small cargo vessel, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She was really doing this. Really leaving behind everything she'd ever known: her job as a librarian, her small apartment in Manchester, her few remaining friends who still spoke to her after Thomas had systematically isolated her from everyone who cared about her. Thomas. Even thinking his name made her stomach turn. She'd met him at a university lecture on medieval history. He'd been charming, attentive, sophisticated in ways that made her feel special. They'd dated for 6 months before he proposed. She'd said yes because she thought she loved him, because he made her feel protected and wanted. The wedding ring had felt like a promise of safety. It wasn't until after she'd moved in with him that she discovered the truth. The locked room in the basement, the strange visitors who came only after midnight, the way he'd started insisting she donate blood at specific clinics, always bringing home the paperwork for her to sign. And then, 3 weeks ago, she'd found the contracts. Thomas wasn't vampire himself. He was what they called a Renfield, a human who served vampire interests in exchange for money and the promise of eventual transformation. And he'd been selling her blood, selling it to a vampire house in London, preparing her as a potential long-term donor. The contracts outlined everything: her diet, her schedule, her reproductive expectations. She was being groomed like livestock. Diana had run that same night, taking only what she could carry. She'd stayed with a friend for 2 days before Thomas found her. He'd been calm, persuasive, explaining that she'd misunderstood, that this was an honor, that the vampire he served would treat her well. When she'd refused, his mask had slipped. He'd grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise and told her that she'd already been marked, that the vampire had paid for her, that she couldn't just walk away. But she had walked away. She'd filed a police report. Though she knew it would go nowhere, the treaties gave vampires certain rights over contracted donors, and if Thomas had forged her signature convincingly enough, she might actually be legally bound. So she decided to disappear entirely, to cross to mainland Europe, where she had a distant cousin in Prague who might help her start over. The ship's cabin below deck was cramped and musty, smelling of fish and diesel fuel. Diana sat on a narrow cot, hugging her bag to her chest as the engines rumbled to life. Through the small porthole, she watched the lights of Harwich fade into the distance. Somewhere out there, Thomas was probably looking for her, and somewhere out there, in the vast night that was now falling across the water, vampires were waking. The crossing should take about 3 hours in good conditions. Diana tried to sleep but couldn't. Every creak of the ship, every change in the engine's rhythm made her jump. She kept imagining pale hands reaching through the porthole, fangs glinting in the darkness. She must have dozed eventually because she jerked awake to the sound of shouting above deck. The engines had stopped. The ship was eerily still, rocking gently on waves that suddenly seemed too quiet. Diana's blood went cold. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. Footsteps above, multiple sets, the captain's voice high and frightened, saying something she couldn't quite make out. Then another voice, smooth and cultured and completely inhuman in its perfect diction. "We're simply conducting a routine inspection. Surely you have no objection to that, Captain Morrison." Vampires. They'd been boarded by vampires. Diana looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the cabin was barely 10 feet square. There was nowhere to go. Her hand went to her throat instinctively, as if she could somehow protect it. The cabin door opened. Diana had seen vampires on television, in carefully staged press conferences and official state functions. She'd seen them in photographs, pale and beautiful and unreal. But she'd never been in the same room as one, never felt the weight of their presence, never understood why humans had feared them for millennia. She understood now. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the small cabin feel even smaller. His hair was pure white, falling to his shoulders in a way that should have looked feminine, but somehow only enhanced his masculine elegance. His skin was porcelain pale in the lantern light, flawless and smooth. He wore modern clothes, a black suit that looked obscenely expensive, but he moved like something from another century, with a grace that seemed choreographed. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Dark as midnight, ancient and knowing, they fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. "Well," he said softly, "this is unexpected." 2 more vampires filed in behind him. Both male, both with the same white hair and pale skin, though neither had quite the same commanding presence. They were clearly subordinates, guards perhaps. "My Lord Aldrich," one of them said. "She's human, just a passenger." The first vampire, Aldrich, tilted his head slightly, studying Diana with those impossible eyes. "Yes, I can see that, Mikhail. The question is why a young human woman is fleeing across vampire-controlled waters in the middle of the night. That suggests either desperation or foolishness." Diana forced herself to speak, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I bought passage. I'm not doing anything illegal." "Bought passage with what?" Aldrich stepped closer, and Diana caught his scent, something like winter frost in old paper and expensive cologne. "You have no money. I can tell by your clothes, your shoes. Everything you own is in that bag." He was right, of course. Her jeans were 3 years old, fraying at the knees. Her jacket was from a thrift shop. Even her bag was worn leather, carefully maintained but clearly secondhand. "That's none of your business," Diana said, trying to summon some courage she didn't feel. Aldrich's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement perhaps, or interest. "Actually, everything that happens in these waters is my business. I am Aldrich Draculesht, king of the northern vampire courts. These are my territories." Diana's heart stopped. The Vampire King. She'd heard his name on the news, seen his face in newspapers. He was one of the most powerful vampires in Europe, ruler of dozens of vampire houses from Scotland to Denmark. And she'd just told him her business was none of his concern. "I apologize," she said quickly. "I didn't mean, don't apologize for having spirit." Aldrich moved closer still until he was standing directly in front of her. This close, she could see that his eyes weren't quite black. They were the deepest possible red, like wine held up to firelight. "It's refreshing. Now, tell me truthfully, why are you running?" "I'm not running. You traded your wedding ring for passage on a cargo ship that crosses vampire waters at night. You have bruises on your arm that are approximately 2 weeks old, finger-shaped. You keep touching your throat as if expecting an attack. You're running from what?" Diana's hand dropped from her throat. She hadn't even realized she'd been doing it. She looked at this vampire king, this creature who could probably kill her without effort, and made a decision. What did she have to lose? If he wanted to hurt her, he would regardless of what she said. I was sold, she said quietly, by my fiancé. He made contracts with a vampire house in London. I didn't sign them, but he forged my signature. I'm legally considered a contracted donor, which means I have almost no rights. So I ran. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. Aldrich's expression remained perfectly neutral, but the two vampires behind him went very still. Which house? Aldrich's voice was soft, dangerous. House Corvinus. The vampire's name is Lord Nathaniel. I see. Aldrich was quiet for a moment, and Diana could see something calculating behind his eyes. And you thought fleeing to the continent would save you? If the contracts are legitimate, they're enforceable throughout the European vampire courts. Diana's last hope crumbled. She'd known it was a long shot, but she'd hoped that distance might at least buy her time. Then I'm caught either way. Perhaps. Aldrich reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. Somehow seeing a vampire use a smartphone was jarring, a collision of ancient and modern that her brain couldn't quite process. He typed something quickly, then waited. A response came within seconds. He read it, and his expression darkened. The contracts are registered, he said, but they're improperly filed. The human signatory supposedly you never appeared for the mandatory verification interview. That makes them preliminary at best, unenforceable at worst. Diana felt a surge of hope. So I'm not bound to them? Legally, no. Technically, Lord Nathaniel could argue that you owe him compensation for breach of preliminary contract, but that's a civil matter, not a blood matter. Your fiancé, however, has committed fraud. Forging documents related to vampire contracts is a serious offense under the treaty laws. He's not my fiancé anymore, Diana said quietly. Aldrich looked at her, really looked at her, and Diana felt like he was seeing through to her bones. No, he agreed. I don't suppose he is. What's your name? Diana Jenkins. Diana. He said her name like he was tasting it, testing its weight. You traded your wedding ring for passage. The captain has it? Yes. Aldrich turned to one of his subordinates. Mikhail, retrieve it. Compensate the captain appropriately for his trouble and for his discretion. My lord? Mikhail seemed confused. Do it. Mikhail disappeared above deck. Aldrich remained, watching Diana with those ancient eyes. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Why are you helping me? Diana finally asked. I haven't decided if I am yet, Aldrich replied. But I dislike fraud, and I particularly dislike vampires who circumvent proper protocol. Lord Nathaniel knows better. If he wanted a donor, he should have courted you properly, not purchased you through a third party like livestock. Vampires court humans? The civilized ones do. Despite what your media might suggest, most of us prefer willing donors to terrified ones. Fear taints the blood. He paused. Also, I find slavery distasteful, a regrettable byproduct of living through the centuries that practiced it. Diana stared at him. He was nothing like she'd expected. Nothing like the cold, cruel creatures from stories, or even like the polished politicians she'd seen on television. He was complicated. Mikhail returned, holding Diana's wedding ring carefully in his palm as if it were something precious. He handed it to Aldrich, who examined it in the lantern light. Your grandmother's? He asked Diana. How did you? It's old, 1940s craftsmanship, perhaps earlier. The wear pattern suggests it was worn for decades before coming to you. He held it out to her. You should have it back. You'll need something to sell when you reach Prague. Diana took the ring, her fingers brushing his. His skin was cool but not cold, smooth as marble. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Aldrich stepped back, and Diana realized how close they'd been standing. I'm redirecting this ship to Calais as originally intended. When you arrive, you'll be met by members of my house. They'll provide you with travel documents, enough money to reach your destination safely, and legal paperwork that formally invalidates the contracts with House Corvinus. I can't accept that. I don't have any way to repay you. I'm not asking for repayment. Consider it an investment in proper protocol. When word spreads that I personally intervened on behalf of a human defrauded by another vampire's house, it sends a message about acceptable behavior. He paused at the cabin door. Also, if I'm being honest, I find your courage interesting. You stood up to me despite being terrified. That takes unusual strength of will. I am terrified, Diana admitted. I know. I can hear your heartbeat. It's like a rabbit's. But he said it almost gently, without mockery. Try to rest. We'll have you in Calais before dawn. He left, his subordinates following. Diana heard the engine start up again, felt the ship begin to move. She sank onto the cot, her legs suddenly too weak to support her, and stared at the wedding ring in her palm. The Vampire King had given it back to her. The crossing was uneventful after that. Diana dozed fitfully, waking every time the ship's movements changed. When they finally docked, the sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, that deep blue that came before dawn. True to his word, Aldrich had gotten her to Calais before sunrise. Diana climbed onto the deck on shaky legs. The port was quiet, just a few early workers moving about. Captain Morrison wouldn't meet her eyes, but he nodded toward the dock where two figures waited. They were clearly vampires, the same white hair, the same pale skin, the same uncanny grace. But these were female, both dressed in practical modern clothes that somehow still looked elegant. Miss Jenkins, the taller one said, her accent Eastern European. I'm Katerina, this is Sophia. Lord Aldrich sent us to assist you. He's not here? Diana looked around without meaning to. He had to return before dawn, Sophia said, her voice softer than her companion's. He asked us to ensure you have everything you need. They led her to a car parked nearby, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Diana had made in her entire life. Katerina handed her a leather folder. Inside you'll find a new passport, 5,000 euros in cash, and legal documents formally rejecting the contracts with House Corvinus. There's also a letter of protection bearing Lord Aldrich's seal. It declares you under the direct protection of the northern courts. Any vampire who troubles you will answer to him personally. Diana opened the folder with trembling hands. Everything was there, exactly as promised. The passport even had her photo. Where had they gotten that? The letter was written on heavy paper with an elaborate wax seal, the kind of thing that looked like it belonged in a museum. I don't understand, Diana said. Why would he do all this for a stranger? Katerina and Sophia exchanged a glance. Sophia smiled slightly. Lord Aldrich has his reasons. He doesn't often take personal interest in matters like this, but when he does, he's thorough. Will I see him again? The question slipped out before Diana could stop it. Another exchanged glance. This time Katerina answered. That depends. Do you want to? Did she? Diana thought about those ancient eyes, that commanding presence, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving. He'd terrified her, yes, but he'd also been kind, in his own way. Fair, honest. I don't know, Diana admitted. An honest answer. Lord Aldrich appreciates honesty. Sophia handed her a card, thick black paper with silver writing. Just a phone number, nothing else. If you ever need assistance, call this number, day or night. Someone from the northern courts will help you. They drove her to the train station and waited with her until the Prague train arrived. As Diana boarded, Katerina called out, Be well, Diana Jenkins. You're braver than you know. The train journey took all day. Diana spent it staring out the window, watching the French countryside give way to German forests, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. She'd fled England with nothing. She'd been intercepted by the Vampire King himself. And now she had money, papers, and protection from one of the most powerful creatures in Europe. It felt like a dream or a trap. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Her cousin Petra lived in a small apartment in Prague's Old Town, working as a translator. They'd only met twice at family reunions years ago, but Petra had always been kind. When Diana called from the train station, Petra didn't hesitate. Come straight here, I'll make up the couch. Petra's apartment was tiny but warm, filled with books in a dozen languages and the smell of good coffee. She took one look at Diana and pulled her into a tight hug. You look exhausted. When did you last eat? Diana couldn't remember. Petra fed her soup and bread, then sent her to shower while she made up the couch with clean sheets. It was only when Diana was finally lying down, clean and fed and safe, that she started to cry. Great shuddering sobs that she'd been holding back for weeks. Petra sat with her, stroking her hair and not asking questions. That was the kindness Diana needed most. The first week in Prague passed in a blur. Diana slept a lot, her body catching up on weeks of fear and poor rest. Petra went to work during the day and came home with groceries, never making Diana feel like a burden. They talked a little about Thomas and what had happened, but Petra didn't push for details. "You're safe here," Petra said firmly. "Stay as long as you need." Diana started looking for work, but her situation was complicated. She had a new passport, but no work history under that identity. The documents Aldrich had provided were flawless, but building a life around them would take time. She needed to establish herself, get legitimate work papers, find a job that would hire her without references. It was overwhelming. Some days, Diana wondered if she should have just stayed in England, dealt with the legal system, taken her chances with the contracts. At least that would have been familiar misery. On the 10th night in Prague, Diana woke around 3 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. She went to the window, looking out over the city's medieval rooftops. Prague was beautiful at night, all Gothic spires and warm lights. She found herself thinking about Aldrich, wondering where he was, what he was doing. Did vampire kings sleep? Did they have palaces, courts, normal lives? She was still holding the black card Sophia had given her. She'd kept it in her pocket every day since Calais, though she wasn't sure why. It wasn't like she needed anything. Aldrich had already done more than enough. But she wanted to call. She wanted to hear his voice, to ask him why he'd helped her, to understand what he'd seen in her that made her worth his attention. Diana told herself it was stupid. You didn't call the Vampire King at 3 a.m. just because you were lonely and confused. That was how horror stories started. She put the card away and went back to bed. The next day, Petra came home from work with news. "There's a position at my company. They need someone to organize their archives, lots of historical documents, multilingual materials. I told them about your library background. They want to interview you tomorrow." It was exactly the kind of job Diana was qualified for, the kind that wouldn't ask too many questions about her past. She went to the interview in borrowed clothes, her heart pounding, and somehow talked her way into a provisional position. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to start contributing to rent, to begin building something real. Diana threw herself into work. The company's archives were a mess, decades of documents in Czech, German, French, and English, all jumbled together without any organizing system. It was perfect for her. She could lose herself in creating order from chaos, in the familiar smell of old paper and the satisfaction of cataloging and preserving. 3 weeks after arriving in Prague, Diana was filing documents in the basement archive when the lights went out. She froze, her librarian's instincts screaming about fire hazards and preservation protocols. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Hello, Diana." She'd recognize that voice anywhere, that perfect diction, that cultured accent that spoke of centuries rather than years. Aldrich? She could barely see him in the darkness, just a pale shape moving with inhuman grace. "Forgive the dramatic entrance. Your building's security is quite good. I had to disable the cameras and lights to enter without causing alarm." He moved closer, and Diana's eyes adjusted enough to make out his features. He looked exactly as she remembered, white hair, pale skin, those dark red eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I wanted to see how you were settling in, to ensure House Corvinus hasn't troubled you." "I've been fine. Your documents worked perfectly. No one's bothered me." "Good." He paused, and Diana had the sense he was studying her the same way he had on the ship. "You're working as an archivist." "How do you know that?" "I keep track of people under my protection. It's not surveillance precisely, just awareness." "That's definitely surveillance." She saw, rather than heard his laugh, a slight movement of his shoulders, a glimpse of white teeth. "Perhaps, does it bother you?" It should. It was invasive, controlling, exactly the kind of thing she'd fled from Thomas. But somehow, with Aldrich, it felt different. Not possessive, but protective. A subtle distinction, but an important one. "I don't know," Diana said honestly. "Why are you really here?" Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because in 800 years of existence, I've never met a human quite like you. Because when you looked at me on that ship, you were terrified, but you didn't flinch. You fascinate me, Diana Jenkins." Diana's heart was racing now, but not entirely from fear. I'm not special. I'm just someone who ran away. You're someone who chose freedom over security, uncertainty over servitude. You gave up your only valuable possession for a chance at escape. That's not ordinary. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell that scent again, frost and paper and winter nights. I would like to know you better, if you're willing. You're the Vampire King. I'm a human archivist who's barely making rent. What could you possibly want from me? Your company, your conversation, your perspective on a world that's largely forgotten how to surprise me. He paused. Also, if I'm being entirely honest, I find you extraordinarily attractive. Diana's breath caught. No one had said anything like that to her in years. Thomas had wanted her for her blood, for her usefulness, but Aldrich was looking at her like she was precious, like she mattered for herself. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to date a vampire. I don't even know how to date normally anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. May I take you to dinner tomorrow night? Vampires don't eat. No, but I enjoy the theater of it, and I very much enjoy watching beautiful women enjoy good food. Diana felt herself blush. Okay, yes, dinner? Excellent, I'll collect you at 8. The lights flickered back on, and Aldrich was suddenly at the stairs, moving too fast for human eyes to follow. Until tomorrow, Diana. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the archive with her racing heart and the distinct feeling that her life had just become infinitely more complicated. Petra's reaction when Diana told her was predictable. Are you insane? You're going on a date with a vampire, with the Vampire King? He helped me. He's been kind. Diana, honey, I love you, but you have terrible judgment in men. Your last boyfriend tried to sell you to vampires, and now you're dating one? I'm not dating him. It's just dinner. But even as she said it, Diana knew it was more than that. The way Aldrich had looked at her, the way her heart had responded, this was dangerous territory. Not because he might hurt her physically, but because she could feel herself wanting to trust him, wanting to believe that something good could come from this impossible situation. She wore her best dress, which wasn't saying much, since her entire wardrobe fit in one small closet. Simple black, hem to her knees, professional but feminine. She left her hair down and wore the minimum of makeup. If Aldrich wanted her company, he'd get her as she actually was, not some dressed-up version. He arrived exactly at 8, driving himself in a car that probably cost more than Petra's apartment. He wore another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray, that made his white hair look even more striking. You look lovely, he said, opening the car door for her with old-fashioned courtesy. You look like you walked out of a fashion magazine. 800 years of practice, one learns to dress well. He smiled and Diana caught a glimpse of fangs. It should have frightened her. Instead, she found it almost reassuring, a reminder of what he was, keeping her from getting lost in the illusion that this was a normal date with a normal man. He took her to a restaurant that definitely wasn't in any guidebook Diana had seen. They entered through an unmarked door in the old town, descended a stone staircase that looked medieval, and emerged in a stunning underground space, all vaulted ceilings and candlelight and tables set with crystal and silver. Drezzo. This is a vampire establishment, Aldrich explained as they were seated in a private alcove. But they serve human food as well. Many vampires enjoy dining with mortal companions. The menu was in Czech, French, and Latin. Aldrich translated effortlessly, recommending dishes with the enthusiasm of someone who remembered eating and missed it. Diana ordered roasted duck, and when it arrived, it was the best thing she'd tasted in months. Aldrich watched her eat with evident pleasure, sipping occasionally from a crystal glass filled with something dark red that Diana tried not to think too hard about. Tell me about yourself, he said. Not the recent trauma. I want to know who Diana Jenkins is when she's not running or surviving. So Diana talked. About growing up in a small town in northern England, about discovering books as an escape, about falling in love with libraries and archives and the way information could be preserved and organized. About her mother, who died when Diana was 16, and her father, who'd remarried someone Diana never connected with. About feeling like she'd never quite fit anywhere, until she found her place among books and silence. Aldrich listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions, making connections she wouldn't have expected. He was easy to talk to once she got past the fact that he was an 800-year-old vampire. "Your turn," Diana said finally. "Tell me about yourself. What would you like to know?" "Everything. How old are you really? Where are you from? How did you become the Vampire King?" Aldrich leaned back, swirling the contents of his glass. "I was born in 1224 in what's now Romania. I was the third son of a minor noble family, which meant I had education but little prospects. I was turned at 28 by a vampire who saw potential in me. That was during the Mongol invasions, a time of tremendous chaos and violence." "That's horrible." "It was, but it was also opportunity. The old order was collapsing, and those of us who were adaptable could rise quickly. I built alliances, consolidated power, and eventually established what became the Northern Courts. I've ruled for approximately 600 years with varying degrees of success." "Don't you get tired living that long?" "Sometimes. Often, actually. The world changes, and you change with it, or you become irrelevant. Most of my early companions are gone now, either destroyed or so lost in the past they can barely function in the present. Vampires who can't adapt tend to fade." "Is that why you're interested in me? Because I'm something new?" Aldrich met her eyes. "Partly, but mostly because you remind me what it means to be brave. Vampires are strong, fast, nearly immortal. We don't require courage the way humans do. You faced me on that ship with nothing but your will, knowing I could kill you easily. That's a kind of strength I've almost forgotten existed." Diana felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just terrified and stubborn." "Yes, it was magnificent." They talked for hours. The restaurant emptied around them, but the staff never rushed them, never brought a check. Diana realized this was probably Aldrich's establishment, or at least one where his word was law. When he finally drove her home, the sky was beginning to lighten. Aldrich walked her to Petra's building, moving with obvious discomfort in the pre-dawn light. "You should go," Diana said, "before the sun rises." "I have a few minutes yet." He took her hand, his cool fingers gentle against hers. "May I see you again?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "Tomorrow night? I'd like to show you something." "What?" "A surprise. Dress warmly." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-world courtesy. Then he was gone, moving with vampire speed to his car and away before the sun could crest the horizon. Diana floated up the stairs to Petra's apartment, feeling like she'd stepped into a fairy tale. A dangerous, complicated fairy tale, but magical nonetheless. The next night, Aldrich took her to a castle. An actual castle perched on a hillside outside Prague, invisible from the road behind wards and privacy screens that made mortal eyes slide away without noticing it. "This is one of my residences," Aldrich explained as they walked through halls lined with paintings and tapestries that belonged in museums. "I maintain properties throughout the Northern Territories. This one is my favorite. It has good libraries." He showed her his collection with obvious pride. Thousands of books, some so old they required climate-controlled cases, others stacked casually on tables like he'd just been reading them. First editions, illuminated manuscripts, volumes in languages Diana didn't recognize. "This is incredible," she breathed, running her fingers along leather spines. "Some of these must be priceless." "Most of them, but they're meant to be read, not locked away. What's the point of preservation if no one enjoys what's preserved?" Diana turned to find him watching her again with that intense focus that made her feel like the only person in the world. "Thank you for showing me this. Thank you for appreciating it. Most people see wealth or curiosities. You see what I see: knowledge, stories, connection to the past." He moved closer. "Diana, I need to be honest with you about my intentions." Her heart rate picked up. "Okay." "I don't do casual relationships. When I'm interested in someone, I'm completely interested. I want to spend time with you, learn everything about you, integrate you into my life. If that's too much, too fast, tell me now. And if it's not too much, then I'd like to court you properly, the old-fashioned way, with full transparency about what that means." He paused. "I'm a vampire. I drink blood. I can't go out in daylight. I'll outlive you by centuries unless you choose transformation, which is a conversation for much later. I'm possessive, protective, and I have enemies who might see you as a vulnerability. Those are the realities." Diana considered. Everything he said was true, and all of it should have sent her running. But she thought about the alternative, going back to her small life, her safe job, never knowing what this could become. She'd already gambled everything to escape a cage. What was one more risk? "I want this," she said. "I want to see where this goes." Aldrich's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually composed face into something almost boyish. "Then let me show you the rest of the castle, starting with the room I think you'll love most." He led her up a winding stair to a tower chamber with windows overlooking the forest. The room was set up as a study, with a desk, comfortable chairs, and more books. But what caught Diana's attention was the shelf of modern paperbacks, romance novels, fantasy, even a few mysteries. "You read romance novels?" "I enjoy stories about connection and emotion. Why does that surprise you?" "It doesn't. It's just sweet." "I'm 800 years old, Diana. I've had plenty of time to explore varied interests." He settled into one of the chairs, gesturing for her to take the other. "Tell me, what do you think happens next, in your ideal version of this relationship?" Diana sat, tucking her legs under her. "Honestly, I don't know. I've never dated someone who will outlive me by centuries. I've never been involved with someone so far outside my normal world." "Then let me paint you a picture," Aldrich said softly. "We continue as we are: dinners, conversations, time together. You keep your job, your independence. I don't ask you to change your life, only to let me be part of it. Eventually, if things progress, you'd meet my court, my inner circle. They'd be skeptical at first, but they'd come to respect you as I do. And then we decide together what comes next. Maybe you choose transformation eventually, maybe you don't. Maybe we have 50 years together, or 500. The details matter less than the commitment." "You'd commit to me? A human you barely know?" "I'd commit to discovering whether what I feel for you is sustainable. I've had lovers before, Diana, hundreds of them, across centuries. But I've only truly loved a handful of times, and it's been decades since anyone captured my attention like you have." He leaned forward. "You make me feel curious again. Engaged. That's rarer than you know." Diana's breath caught. "I don't know if I can love someone who's so different." "Then don't decide now. Let me court you. Let yourself feel what you feel. We have time." "Do we? I'm 26. I'll age while you stay the same. You'll be beautiful at 50, at 70, at 90. Human aging doesn't diminish worth, Diana. If anything, it adds depth." He reached across the space between them, offering his hand. "Trust me. Please." Diana took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just existing in each other's presence while the night deepened outside. Over the following weeks, Diana fell into a rhythm. Days were for work, organizing archives, and slowly building a life in Prague. Nights were for Aldrich. He picked her up after sunset, and they went everywhere together: operas, museums, late-night walks through Prague's medieval streets. He introduced her to other vampires from his court, each meeting carefully orchestrated so Diana never felt overwhelmed. Katerina and Sophia became something like friends, teaching Diana the protocols of vampire society, explaining the complex hierarchies and old blood feuds that governed their world. It was like learning a new language, but Diana was good at that. "You're doing well," Katerina told her one evening while Aldrich was in a meeting. "Most humans would have fled by now." "Why?" "Because we're predators, and you're prey. It's in your DNA to fear us." "I do fear you," Diana admitted, "but I trust Aldrich. And he trusts you, so I'm trying to trust you too." Sophia smiled. "That's wise. Trust is earned, not assumed. But for what it's worth, you make him happy. We haven't seen him this engaged in decades." Diana thought about that a lot. She could see the changes in Aldrich too, the way he laughed more easily, the way he sought out her opinions, the way he touched her constantly as if reassuring himself she was real. Small touches, always respectful, but intimate. A hand at her back, fingers brushing her hair from her face, his cool palm against her cheek. They hadn't kissed yet, and Diana wondered about that. Aldrich was affectionate but restrained, as if holding himself back. She finally asked him about it one night when they were in his castle library, reading companionably in adjacent chairs. "Why haven't you kissed me?" Aldrich looked up from his book, eyebrows raised. I'm waiting for the right moment. We've had dozens of perfect moments. Not perfect enough. I've waited 800 years to feel like this. I can wait for absolute perfection. Diana set down her book and crossed to his chair. She was shaking slightly, but determined. What if I don't want to wait? Aldrich went very still. Diana, you said you wanted transparency, so here's mine. I want you. I think about you constantly. When you touch me, I want more. I'm tired of being careful and safe. Kiss me. For a moment, Aldrich just stared at her with those ancient knowing eyes. Then he stood in one fluid motion, cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. It was like nothing Diana had ever experienced. Aldrich kissed the way he did everything with complete focus and intensity, like she was the only thing that mattered in the world. His lips were cool but not cold, gentle but commanding. When his tongue touched hers, Diana made a sound she'd never made before, desperate and needy. Aldrich pulled back slightly, breathing hard despite not needing air. We should stop. Why? Because I want you too much. Because if we continue, I won't want to stop, and you deserve to be certain. Diana grabbed his shirt, pulling him back. I am certain. Please, Aldrich, I need this. I need you. She saw his control shatter. He kissed her again, harder this time, backing her against the bookshelf with gentle pressure. His hands were everywhere, her waist, her hair, her throat, always careful, always checking that she wanted this. Diana arched into him, feeling the impossible coolness of his body through their clothes. My chambers, Aldrich said against her mouth. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. He swept her up, literally swept her into his arms like something from a fairy tale, and carried her through the castle to a suite of rooms she'd never seen. The bedroom was enormous, dominated by a massive four-poster bed with dark curtains. Aldrich set her down gently, then stepped back, giving her space to decide. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. Diana answered by pulling off her sweater, then her shirt, standing before him in just her bra and jeans. I'm not changing my mind. Aldrich's eyes darkened to full red. He closed the distance between them, kissing her again while his hands found her skin. Cool fingers traced her spine, making her shiver. Diana fumbled with his shirt buttons, desperate to feel him, and Aldrich helped, shrugging out of the expensive fabric without care. His body was as pale as his face, perfectly sculpted like marble. Diana ran her hands over his chest, his shoulders, his arms, marveling at the inhuman perfection of him. You're beautiful. So are you. Unbearably so. He unhooked her bra with practiced ease, then paused, looking at her like she was art. I want to be careful with you. You don't have to be that careful. I won't break. No, but you're precious to me. I want to do this right. He laid her on the bed, taking his time, learning her body with hands and mouth. Diana lost herself in sensation, the coolness of his touch against her heated skin, the way he seemed to know exactly where to kiss, to caress, to make her gasp. When he finally joined with her, moving with infinite patience and care, Diana understood what people meant when they talked about transcendent experiences. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Diana's heart still racing while Aldrich stroked her hair. Are you all right? He asked softly. Better than all right. That was... She couldn't find words. Yes, it was. He kissed her temple. Stay with me tonight. I want to hold you while you sleep. Diana curled into him, feeling safer than she had in years. Aldrich, thank you. For everything. For saving me, for protecting me, for this. You don't need to thank me for wanting you, Diana. That's entirely selfish on my part. He pulled a blanket over them both. Sleep. I'll be here when you wake. She believed him, and that trust, more than anything else, told Diana she was falling in love. The trouble came 3 weeks later, in the form of a formal complaint filed with the Vampire Council of Europe. Lord Nathaniel of House Corvinus was demanding compensation for breach of contract, claiming that Diana had been legally bound to him and that Aldrich had interfered with legitimate house business. The complaint was obviously baseless. The contracts had never been properly executed, but it was also politically motivated. House Corvinus was attempting to embarrass Aldrich, to make him look weak or corrupt. It's a power play, Katerina explained to Diana. They were in Aldrich's castle, gathered in a formal meeting room while Aldrich dealt with the council. Corvinus knows he'll lose the legal case, but he's forcing Aldrich to spend political capital defending you. It makes Aldrich look either smitten or foolish. Can't Aldrich just ignore it? Not without looking like he's above the law. The treaty system requires all vampires, even kings, to answer legitimate legal challenges. Diana felt sick. This was her fault. If she'd never gotten involved with Aldrich, if she'd just disappeared into Prague quietly, none of this would be happening. Sophia seemed to read her thoughts. Don't blame yourself. House Corvinus has been looking for an excuse to challenge Aldrich for years. You're just the catalyst. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. But Diana couldn't shake the guilt. That evening, when Aldrich returned from the council meeting, she tried to apologize. I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause you political problems. Aldrich looked exhausted, something she'd never seen before. Vampires didn't get physically tired, but they could be emotionally drained. This isn't your fault, Diana. Nathaniel's being petty because I made him look bad. The council will rule in our favor, but it's going to take time and energy. What if I testified? Explained what Thomas did, how the contracts were fraudulent? Absolutely not. I won't put you through that. The vampire legal system isn't kind to human witnesses, and Corvinus would tear you apart on cross-examination just to hurt me. So what do we do? Aldrich pulled her into his arms, holding her close. We wait. We trust the system. And we don't let Nathaniel's pettiness change what's happening between us. But it was hard not to let it affect them. Over the next few weeks, Aldrich was constantly in meetings, dealing with legal procedures and political fallout. Their time together became precious and rare. Diana tried to be understanding, but she felt the distance growing. Then, Thomas showed up in Prague. Diana was leaving work one evening when she saw him across the street watching her. He looked the same handsome in a conventional way, well-dressed, charming on the surface, but now she could see the rot underneath, the cruelty in his smile. She ran. Didn't think, didn't hesitate, just ran back into her building and called the number on the black card with shaking hands. Katerina answered. Diana, what's wrong? Thomas is here, in Prague. He was watching me. Where are you? My work building. I'm in the lobby. Stay there. Don't move. We're coming. Sophia and Katerina arrived within 10 minutes, moving with vampire speed. They swept Diana into a car and drove straight to Aldrich's castle. He can't hurt you here, Sophia assured her. This is sovereign vampire territory. He'd have to be suicidal to try anything. But Diana couldn't stop shaking. Seeing Thomas had brought everything back, the fear, the helplessness, the feeling of being trapped and owned. Aldrich found her curled up in his library, trying not to cry. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands. Tell me what happened. Diana explained through tears. Aldrich listened, his expression growing darker. I'll handle this, he said quietly when she finished. Thomas won't bother you again. What are you going to do? Nothing illegal, but he needs to understand that you're under my protection and what that means. He cupped her face gently. Diana, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Stay here tonight. I'll return before dawn. He left and Diana waited, pacing the library anxiously. Katerina and Sophia stayed with her, trying to distract her with conversation, but Diana could only think about Aldrich and what he might be doing. He returned just as the sky was beginning to lighten, looking satisfied. It's done. Thomas has been escorted to the airport and put on a flight back to London. I've also filed formal charges against him with the British authorities: fraud, forgery, attempted trafficking. He'll be facing human legal consequences now. Will they actually prosecute? With the evidence I've provided and the political pressure I can bring to bear? Yes. He won't see jail time, unfortunately, but his life is about to become very difficult. Aldrich sat beside her, looking tired. More importantly, I've made it clear to every vampire house in Europe that you are mine. Anyone who troubles you will answer to me personally. That's not a threat they'll take lightly. Diana leaned into him. Thank you. Always. You're mine to protect now. He paused. If you want to be, that is. I want to be. Diana kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude, trust, and the love she hadn't quite admitted yet. Aldrich responded with equal intensity, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I think I've loved you since you stood up to me on that ship, terrified but unwavering. I need you to know that." Diana's breath caught. "I love you too. I didn't want to. I tried not to, but I do." "Why did you try not to?" "Because you're immortal and I'm not. Because this can't last forever. Because eventually I'll grow old and die, and you'll still be here, looking exactly like this." Aldrich was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's a solution to that if you want it. Not now, you're far too young to make this decision now, but eventually, when you're ready, I could turn you. You could become vampire, live as long as I do, stay with me for centuries instead of decades. Is that what you want?" "I want whatever gives us the most time together. If you prefer to remain human, to live your natural span, I'll treasure every moment we have. But if you want eternity, I can give you that." Diana didn't have an answer yet. Becoming vampire was a massive decision, one that shouldn't be made in the heat of the moment, but knowing it was possible, knowing Aldrich wanted forever with her, that meant everything. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, we have time." He kissed her again, softer this time. "For now, let's just be together. Everything else can wait." The council case resolved in Aldrich's favor, as expected. House Corvinus was ordered to pay restitution for the fraudulent contracts, and Lord Nathaniel was formally censured. It was a complete victory, though Aldrich seemed more relieved than triumphant. "I'm tired of politics," he told Diana one night. "I've been playing these games for 600 years. Maybe it's time to step back, let someone else deal with the council and the treaties and the endless negotiations." "You'd give up being king?" "Not entirely. But I could delegate more, spend less time in court and more time on things that matter. You, for instance." Diana considered that. She'd never asked Aldrich to change his life for her, but she couldn't deny the appeal of having more of his time and attention. "What would you do instead?" "Travel, maybe. I haven't seen much of the world in recent decades. There are places I'd like to show you: Venice, Istanbul, Kyoto. We could spend a year just exploring." "I'd like that," Diana said softly. "Then we'll do it. Once things settle here, we'll disappear for a while. Just you and me." But before they could make those plans, one final complication arose. Diana's father called. She hadn't spoken to him since leaving England. She'd sent a brief email from Prague saying she was safe and needed space, but nothing more. Now he was on the phone, his voice tight with worry. "Diana, what's going on? I've had police asking questions about you and Thomas. There are rumors, people saying you're involved with vampires." "It's complicated, Dad." "Then explain it to me. Please, I'm your father. I deserve to know if you're safe." So Diana explained. Not everything, but enough: how Thomas had tried to sell her, how she'd fled, how Aldrich had helped her and then become something more. Her father was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Are you happy?" "Yes, happier than I've been in years." "Then I support you. I don't understand it, and it scares me, but I support you." He paused. "Can I meet him? This vampire king of yours?" Diana looked at Aldrich, who'd been listening to the whole conversation with vampire hearing. He nodded. "Yes," Diana said. "You can meet him." They flew to London the following week. Aldrich arranged everything: private jet, luxury hotel, security to ensure they wouldn't be bothered. Meeting Diana's father in a neutral restaurant, Aldrich was charm itself, respectful and honest about his intentions. "I love your daughter, Mr. Jenkins. I want to spend as much time with her as possible, in whatever form that takes. I know I'm not what you'd have chosen for her, but I promise to protect her, cherish her, and honor her choices." Diana's father studied Aldrich for a long moment. Then he said, "She's an adult. She can make her own decisions. But if you hurt her, vampire or not, you'll answer to me." Aldrich smiled. "That's fair. I wouldn't expect anything less." They parted on good terms, and Diana felt a weight lift. Her father's approval meant more than she'd realized. Back in Prague, Diana and Aldrich settled into something resembling normal life. She continued working at the archives. He reduced his council commitments, delegating more to trusted advisors. They spent evenings together, reading, talking, making love, simply existing in each other's presence. Months passed, then a year. Diana turned 28, and Aldrich threw her a party that would have been ostentatious if it hadn't been so perfectly tailored to her interests. A small gathering of people she cared about, a cake from her favorite bakery, and a gift of a first-edition book she'd been wanting for years. "You're too good to me," Diana said, kissing him. "Impossible. I could never be good enough for you." That night, curled up in bed together, Diana said the words she'd been thinking for months. "I want to be turned. I want forever with you." Aldrich went very still. "Are you certain?" "Transformation is irreversible, Diana. You'd be giving up sunlight, normal food, the possibility of children, aging with your friends and family." "I know, but I'd gain centuries with you. I'd gain strength, time, the ability to truly be your equal." She met his eyes. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real life that doesn't have an expiration date." "When?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Soon, but not yet. I want to settle things first. Say proper goodbyes, arrange my affairs. 6 months?" 6 months, Aldrich agreed, "and then I'll turn you and you'll be mine forever." "I'm already yours. Then you'll be mine forever in truth." Those 6 months were bittersweet. Diana traveled back to England to spend time with her father, explaining her decision. He took it better than she expected, crying but accepting. "I always knew I'd lose you someday," he said. "I just thought it would be to old age, not immortality." Diana quit her job, trained her replacement, and organized her few possessions. Most of it she donated or left with Petra, who was sad to see her go but supportive. "You're sure about this?" Petra asked the night before the transformation. "Completely." "Then be happy. You deserve it." The transformation itself took place in Aldrich's castle, in a room prepared specifically for the purpose. Aldrich explained everything beforehand: the pain, the 3-day death sleep, the hunger that would follow. "I'll be with you the entire time," he promised. "I won't leave you alone for a moment." Diana wasn't afraid. She lay down on the prepared bed, and Aldrich settled beside her. "Last chance," he said softly. "No more chances. I want this. I want you. Forever." Aldrich kissed her deeply, then moved to her throat. His fangs sank in with surprising gentleness, and Diana felt her blood flowing out, her life draining away. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it was almost peaceful, like falling asleep. Just before she lost consciousness, she felt Aldrich bite his own wrist and press it to her mouth. "Drink," he commanded, and she did, tasting his blood ancient and powerful and strange. Then, darkness took her. Diana woke 3 days later to a world transformed. Everything was sharper, clearer, more vibrant. She could hear heartbeats in the castle below, smell blood and life and countless scents she'd never noticed before. Her body felt strong, powerful, perfect, and Aldrich was there, exactly as he'd promised, looking at her with wonder and love. "Welcome back," he said softly. Diana launched herself at him, kissing him with newfound vampire strength. He caught her easily, laughing against her mouth. "How do you feel?" "Incredible. Hungry, but incredible. I have blood prepared, and then I want to show you what you can do now." Over the following weeks, Aldrich taught Diana everything: how to feed without killing, how to move with vampire speed, how to use her new strength. She was a quick learner, adapting to her new existence with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. The northern courts accepted her readily. As Aldrich's chosen mate and transformed companion, Diana was automatically given status and respect. Some vampires were skeptical at first, but Diana won them over through sheer competence and her willingness to learn their ways. Katerina and Sophia became true friends, no longer separated by the divide between mortal and immortal. Together, they taught Diana vampire politics, history, and the complex web of alliances that governed their world. A year after her transformation, Aldrich asked Diana to marry him, not a human marriage, but a vampire, bonding an eternal commitment recognized by all the courts. "I'm already yours forever," Diana pointed out. "Yes, but I want it formalized. I want everyone to know you're my mate, my equal, my partner in all things." He produced a ring, not her grandmother's wedding ring, though he'd kept that safe as she'd asked. This was something new, a band of white gold set with rubies that matched vampire eyes. "Marry me, Diana. In the old way, with the full ceremony and witnesses. Yes, always yes. The bonding ceremony took place in Prague, in the same underground vampire establishment where they'd had their first date. Hundreds of vampires attended, along with Diana's father and Petra, who watched with tears in their eyes as Diana and Aldrich spoke vows in Latin, bound their hands with silver cord, and sealed their commitment with blood. Afterward, there was a reception that lasted until dawn. Diana danced with her vampire husband, surrounded by their people, feeling more complete than she'd ever thought possible. "Do you regret it?" Aldrich asked as they swayed together. "Giving up your human life?" Diana looked at him, her mate, her love, her eternity, and smiled. "Not for a moment. You gave me back my life when I was drowning. Everything since has been a gift." "You gave me purpose again," Aldrich replied. "You reminded me why immortality is worth living." They kissed, and Diana tasted forever in it. Years passed. Diana and Aldrich traveled as promised, seeing the world together, making memories that would last centuries. They returned to Prague regularly, maintaining their home there, but they were no longer bound to one place. Diana developed her own interests and projects. She established a network of libraries and archives specifically for preserving vampire history, interviewing elder vampires, and recording their stories before they were lost. It gave her purpose and brought her into contact with vampires from all over the world. Aldrich gradually stepped back from active rule of the northern courts, grooming a successor and taking on more of an advisory role. He'd been king long enough. Now he wanted to be Diana's partner, her companion, her equal. One evening, a decade after Diana's transformation, they stood on the balcony of their Prague castle, watching the city lights below. "Do you remember the night we met?" Aldrich asked. "You mean the night you terrified me on a ship and then gave me back my wedding ring?" "That night, yes. Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Diana leaned into him, feeling the solid coolness of his body against hers. "No, I thought I was just running away. I never imagined I was running toward something." "Neither did I. I thought I was simply correcting an injustice. I never expected to find you." He turned her to face him, his dark red eyes soft with love. "You were worth every political headache, every complication, every moment of doubt. You were worth becoming vampire for, worth giving up the sun, worth choosing forever." They kissed as the night deepened around them, two immortals who'd found each other across impossible odds. Diana thought about the woman she'd been desperate, frightened, standing at a harbor with nothing but a wedding ring and hope. She'd traded that ring for passage across the sea, expecting nothing but escape. Instead, she'd found love, transformation, and a future that stretched out endlessly ahead of her. The Vampire King had returned her ring at dawn, but he'd given her so much more: safety, partnership, respect, and a love that would last forever. And Diana, who'd once thought herself trapped and powerless, had become someone powerful in her own right. Not because of what Aldrich had given her, but because she'd chosen bravery over fear, possibility over safety, love over loneliness. She'd traded a ring for passage, she'd gained eternity, and she would spend every moment of that eternity grateful for the desperate gamble that had brought her to this moment, to this man, to this impossible and perfect life. "I love you," she told Aldrich, the words as true now as they'd been the first time she'd spoken them. "Ah, I love you," he replied, "for all the centuries we have ahead of us." They stood together as the stars came out, two vampires with forever stretched before them, their story complete but their adventure just beginning. The ring. Diana's grandmother's wedding ring sat in a place of honor in their castle, a reminder of where they'd started. But it was no longer a symbol of what Diana had given up. Instead, it represented what she'd found: the courage to choose her own fate, to risk everything for freedom, and to accept love when it came from the most unexpected source. She'd traded her wedding ring for passage across the sea. The Vampire King had returned it at dawn, and in doing so, he'd given her everything she'd never known she wanted. Their story was complete, no threads left dangling, no questions unanswered. Just two souls who'd found each other across the divide between human and vampire, mortal and immortal, fear and love. And they lived, if not happily ever after in the fairy tale sense, then happily for as long as forever lasted, which was exactly as long as they wanted. The end of their beginning, and the beginning of everything else.